Hello everyone, this is Grandmaster Max Illingworth here, and you've probably been wondering, okay, I know all about the bishop pair advantage, and the bishop pair can be quite useful, having the better minor pieces, but how exactly do we use this advantage, and why is it that two bishops are better than, let's say, a bishop and a knight, for example? So that's one thing we're going to learn in today's game from the 2019 Turkish League match between the two Grandmasters, Mustafa Yilmaz against Bartlomew Hebela. So it started out as a Queen's Gambit, and the way Black played it was he played this quite fashionable line with an early a6, and basically the idea of playing a6 is as follows, where, say if Black plays moves such as knight f6, which is the main move, then White can, for example, play the exchange variation, and so get a slightly unpleasant pin on the knight, meaning that Black will be under slight pressure in the opening phase, though of course Black's position would still be playable with the standard moves. But with the move a6, Black basically is creating this idea of taking on c4 and then trying to hang on to that extra pawn with the move b5. So that's why White played c takes d5. And while on the one hand it's true that a6 is perhaps not the most useful move for Black in this Carlsbad structure, he's also managed to avoid this bishop g5 pin, which can be useful. And here White did something a little bit different, where rather than playing knight to f3, after which h6 was recently played by Carlsen, I think also Grandelius in some recent Grandmaster games, instead, White came up with the move Queen b3, which I think is a somewhat interesting move for White, actually, where the point is that all of Black's ways to defend this pawn have some slight disadvantage. Say if Black plays knight f6, well, that allows White to go bishop g5 and put some early pressure on the d5 pawn. And if Black plays c6 immediately, well, then you can even play quite aggressively with e4 and... Okay, what do you think might be White's idea if Black were to play d takes e4 in this position? Well done. We wouldn't simply take e4, as that would leave the d pawn hanging. But we can play a nice gambit with bishop c4 and pressure this f7 pawn. And this way get quite good compensation, probably even enough for an advantage, as Black may struggle a lot to get his king castled. And he doesn't have that b5 anymore because of the pin along the a file, as you may have seen already. So in the game, Black played it in the Tarrasch defense spirit, playing this move c5, which is actually maybe not such a bad move, even though it might not be my first choice. Or I might have started with knight f6 instead. So White played knight takes d5. I do think dc5 also deserves investigation, but knight d5 is quite logical, in that if Black does play pawn takes, he will be left with an isolated pawn on d4. So after knight c6, White played knight f3. The problem if you play d takes c5 is that Black can sort of go bishop e6 and sort of get a nice lead in development for the pawn, where after e4 and say bishop takes c5, the pin is a little bit annoying, and probably queen b7 would be a bit too risky in such a position, with White very far behind in development. So basically, just to show why queen b7 is bad, it's basically because after takes and takes, Black has a winning move in this position. And I'll say as a little puzzle for you to see if you can find Black's best move here. So congratulations if you found the move knight to a5, which simply traps a queen and would leave Black with a completely winning position. So instead White went knight to f3. We had c takes d4, and I really like the move that White played in this position, where Black's threat is to go bishop e6 and use the pin against the White knight to the queen. So I'd start with e4, just putting a pawn in the center and making sure that knight is really well protected, so bishop e6 is not a troubling move anymore. So black played d takes e3, white played queen takes e3, getting out of the way of this pin once again with a check. And after bishop e6, how do you think white dealt with the threat to the d5 knight in this position? Well done if you found the move in the game of knight to f4, which it's not the only playable move, but it's the right way to fight for the initiative in this open position by threatening the bishop. And, well, as you kind of know from our theme already, we also can get the bishop pair advantage with this trade on e6. So black played bishop b4. If black does try some other move, such as knight to b4, it looks a little bit annoying that there's a knight to c2 check coming up. But if we really want, we can cover it with moves such as queen to e2. Those are some quite complex lines to start with knight to e6 that you might like to analyze in your own time as a nice calculation exercise. But in the game, black played the more, let's say, obvious move, bishop b4. Just waiting to get the bishop out, and I mean, probably the objectively best move is to play bishop d2 and accept the trade of bishops, where I mean you'll sort of get a similar structure to the game, but where white will develop a bit more quickly. But instead of bishop d2, white played the move knight to d2 in this position, and in turn black could play queen e7 and defend the bishop that way. But he went for a more creative defense, playing the move queen to d4 instead, with the idea that if knight e6 he can think about trading on e3. Well, after knight takes and f takes, white now actually didn't take the pawn on e6, and I think the reason is that after knight e7, actually even better, knight f7, e7, probably king f8 is really strong, just threatening rook e8, and just the initiative is really strong for black, where if white does try to trade the queens, for example, well, black can even play rook e8 in this position, and you can't play bishop e2 as black would take the queen and use the double pin on white's pieces from there. But if you have to play king d1, then obviously the white king won't be very safe in such an open center. So white didn't lose his sense of danger. He played the move a3 instead. And maybe it was in black's best interest simply to keep the pin on the knight, move like bishop a5, and just sort of make it a bit hard for white to kind of complete his development naturally by pressuring the d2 knight as such. But instead we had queen takes e3 first, which I would say that this next move might be a little bit inaccurate, in that when you play bishop d2, it is true that the knight pair can be somewhat competitive against the bishop pair, particularly if the knights can find stable outposts. But I think that the problem for black here is just that, well, the center is quite open, and white's bishops will quickly get to good diagonals, as we'll see in the game. Now, if I was playing black here, I think I would play knight f6, and I would just try and get the knight to e4 as soon as possible in order to trade off white's bishop pairs as quickly as we can. And I mean, if white tries to stop that with bishop d3, well, then you can get hit with a rook coming to d8 either immediately, or even knight e5 also is quite good to sort of kick the bishops around. And we can sort of see black getting his share of counterplay in a position like this one. It's true we can probably improve on bishop d3, where, for example, maybe g3 and fianchettoing might be a slightly more precise continuation. But black will certainly have his chances in this position, and probably his disadvantage is only quite small. So in the game we had rook to c8 in this position. White played the move bishop to c4. Not the only move, but it does feel right to develop with a tempo and keep the initiative that way. So I had king to e7. White played king e2, and it's one thing to keep in mind in these positions is that it's really a very stable position in that there aren't really any simple tactics. I mean, if black does play a move like knight e5, trying to create some threats, white can simply move the bishop, and black can't really follow up his initiative or his one move attack, and white can simply get the rooks on very natural squares, depending on black's choice. It's also one other thing about these positions with a bishop pair, that because the bishop pair is a more long-term type of advantage, it means that often the exchange of pieces will make the bishop pair even stronger. I remember a nice Carlsen against Nakamura game in 2015 London Chess Classic as a really nice example of this theme, which I've shown a few students in the past. Well, instead Black played, instead of knight e5, he played knight f6. And White just developed naturally, knowing that his advantage was not really going away. So had rook hd8, rook hd1. And in this position, I sort of feel like Black maybe needs to sort of try to get some sort of play, where he played rook d7 in the game, which is a reasonable move, although I feel that either maybe knight e4 might be a better try, just trying to get the knights more active. And also moves like h5 and sort of grabbing some space can be quite useful if you're not sure what else to do in the position. That's often a good principle in the endgame. But if there is an easy way to break through, sort of grab some space and see what happens. So in the game we had rook to d7, White played bishop to a2, and I mean White's plan can be also, if Black does nothing, White might borrow this idea of grabbing some space by pushing the pawns forward. Or he can even just move the bishop and trade the rooks and say his advantage will be somewhat larger if the rooks are all off the board. So after rook dc7, White played this move bishop b1, which is I think a decent practical move to not let the knight come into e4 so easily. I do think that maybe h3 is also interesting, where if Black does play knight e4, which I think what White wanted to avoid, you can always play bishop e1 and sort of use the distance 4 treatment to the Black knight by covering the squares that it can move to forward. And you can always kick the knight later as required. So the idea of h3 is to go for g4, just in case that wasn't clear. So the game saw bishop b1. Black played king f7, which, yeah, maybe the king is actually better on e7 than on f7, as it is on an open file here. And again, Black might consider borrowing the same ideas as before. We're trying to push his pawns forward and create some sort of barricade in the position. Certainly White has, I think, very good chances here, but Black doesn't have any major weaknesses, so actually winning it will require a lot of good technique and, let's say, a little help from Black as well. So the game saw king to f7. White played a nice move here. He sort of asked, well, what's kind of bad about Black's last move? And he realized that rook f1 would be a nice idea, just using the pin. And this is basically, I'd say, the decisive point in the game, where Black, let's say, went from having a worse but holdable position to just being losing. So what Black probably should do is either play h6 or play a move king to e7, when Black would still be significantly worse, but I think his drawing chances are very decent in this position, where it's not that easy for White to kind of break through, and probably he would need to rely on pushing the pawns on at least one flank to try and create weaknesses that way. But instead, Black played knight e5, and, well, this makes a nice puzzle for those of you watching at home. So what would be a really nice continuation for White in this position after Black's knight e5? Now, you might like to pause the video here and think a bit more about it, because this is quite a critical position. So well done if you found the continuation that White played. So first of all, White played rook takes c7, and the point is that after rook takes, that White has a tactic here in the move bishop takes h7, and the point is that normally Black would be able to just trap that bishop, and actually that's what happened in the game, because if Black doesn't play g6, I mean, the bishop moves back and basically White won a pawn for free. But here White has a chance to turn the tables on Black and keep his extra pawn as such, or maybe even more than keep it actually. So do you see the move for White in this position? Okay, well done if you spotted the move bishop g8, which actually turns out to be the only move that wins for White in this position. After other moves, Black can play knight ed7 and sort of pick up the bishop in this sort of way. So this is black's threat. But after bishop g8, well, if black plays king g8, then, I mean, you take on f6 and, well, you might even be winning a second pawn. Because not only are you attacking the e6 pawn, but if black defends it, say with rook e7, you can play bishop c3 and just remove the defender of the g6 pawn to even collect a second pawn. And I know a lot of viewers have some challenges into of converting a winning position in their games, but he had a plan of pushing these pawns and bring the king to attack this b pawn eventually, or the e pawn. I think won't be so difficult to execute in practice. So in the game we had king g7. I suppose I should note that king e7 wasn't a defense either, as there is bishop b4 and the king would be forced to give up its protection of the f6 knight. So after king g7, white won a second pawn, and I'll share the remaining moves just because basically there aren't that many of them left. So black played rook c2, trying to get some counterplay. But white found a nice little trick. It's not the only good move, but I quite like this move, king d1. The point of this move is that, yes, black can get one of his pawns back, but then white has a nice fork of bishop c3. And either black can play rook b5 and still be a pawn down, or if he plays rook b1, then in a position such as this, again, the trade of rooks kind of helps white to convert his advantage, where we can sort of push the e pawn and even create a second pass pawn on the king side eventually. And black also has to watch out for, his weaknesses on the queen side. When you kind of combine all these factors of white's pass pawns and black's weaknesses, it's just not really a tenable position for black with best play. Though you might like to play this position as white against the computer, just to see if you can convert it. So the game saw rook c6, white played bishop to b3, rook d6, king e2, and I think black was sort of nervous about this pin. So to avoid bishop c3, he played knight e4. But then he got hit with bishop b4, and after rook b6, white found a nice move of rook f4, and I mean white is simply up two pawns and also has a very strong bishop pair, and that's why black resigned. He's not in time to get in tricks such as a5 when his own knight is under attack. So yeah, I hope you found this game really useful and instructive. I know it was a little bit of a long game, so congratulations on making it to the end. So yeah, I hope that this gives you also a nice system against a6 with this queen b3 idea, which is actually quite tricky, and I think black has to be quite precise to equalize against it. Probably I would suggest knight f6 and c6 as maybe being the direction to look into. And then so maybe some up with bishop d6 or bishop e7 can be explored depending on black's tastes as well. So anyway, thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this content, then please subscribe. And I will see you in the next video. This is Grandmaster Illingworth. Bye-bye.